Welcome everybody. Overflow crowd in the back. We still have a lot of people pushing to get in, but I don't know if we have enough seating here, so they may have to stand in the background. Anyways, again, welcome everybody, and this is the session where Professor Krishna will give us a presentation. And I would like to give you a very brief introduction to Professor Krishna. Professor Krishna first encountered Krishnamurti when he was 20 years old in Delhi in 1958, and he was very impressed by him and engaged in dialoguing with him over a lengthy period of time. He earned his PhD in physics and became a professor of physics at Banaras Hindu University, which is in Varanasi on the Ganges, the holy city of Hinduism on the Ganges River in northern India, near the Himalayas. And in 1985, Krishnamurti called upon him to take over the rector and directorship of the Banaras school that Krishnamurti had founded. And Professor Krishna assumed that position and has been there pretty much ever since, and currently is guiding the Krishnamurti Study Center in this very same Rajgat Krishnamurti Educational Center in Varanasi. Also, just recently, I'd like to point that out to you in case you're interested and like to pursue some of his impressions on this. He completed a book. It's called A Jewel on a Silver Platter. And it is remembering Jiddu Krishnamurti, and it consists of many different perspectives, let me call it perspectives of Krishnamurti, in that not only does he give his own impression, but he also interviews various people that had significant contact with Krishnamurti. So all of that is included in this book. However, we don't carry it here, unfortunately, but you can obtain it by going to lulu.com. There you go, lulu.com, lulu.com. Or you can write to the publisher, which is, or you can go to the Professor Krishna's website, which is pkrishna.org. Now, having all of that, presenting all of that to you, I'd now like you to welcome Professor Krishna.
I have already another gadget.
Oh, you got already one. Okay, good. Let me turn that off. Oh, yeah. You can turn it off. And here's your water.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Michael, can we in some way arrange for them also to sit? Maybe, sir, if those of you who can sit on the floor, can you come here?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Those who are doing yoga can certainly sit on the floor.
That's it.
Okay. Wanted to thank Michael for that kind introduction. Just one correction. The book is not available on my website, pkrishna.org. Many of these chapters are available as articles there. But in Ojai, it's available at the Ojai retreat. Mr. Ulrich Brugger, he keeps them there, and also at the Crotona bookshop. Krishnamurti made a rather startling statement, which is the title of one of his chapters in Commentaries on Living. It says, "Thinking cannot solve our problems." That's the title of one of his chapters. It's startling because all over the world, human beings are using thought as best as they can to find solutions to problems. But we also know, both from history and through our newspapers and magazines, that there are sort of perennial problems which we have not been able to solve. They are the creation of thought, but in spite of all our knowledge, in spite of all our expertise, so-called intelligence of thought, we have not been able to solve them. Like the problem of religious division, the problem of national division, the problem of war, and now more recently that of terrorism and rioting and so on. The problem of violence. So apparently, it's not amenable to this kind of intelligence which we are cultivating through education in our schools and colleges and universities. Krishnamurti talked of a different kind of intelligence, and we should inquire into that. What did he mean by intelligence? Because he said there is no intelligence without compassion. He didn't accept what we call as intelligence normally in society as intelligence at all. He treated it as just ability, cleverness, and so on. So I want to investigate that statement, but I have found that when I do that, many people think that I am interpreting Krishnamurti. There have been people who have said that to me about my book as well, because the second part of the book talks not about Krishnamurti the person, but about my own investigation of his teaching. I respect their view, but I would like to take this opportunity to say that I am not trying to interpret him. I am not claiming that I am an authority on Krishnamurti. And I think that in this quest for truth, authority has no place whatsoever. Even Krishnamurti himself, if you make him into an authority, you don't come upon the truth. You will come upon the knowledge of what he considered to be the truth. And that's not the same thing. Because truth, as he himself pointed out, lies at the level of perception and not at the level of ideation. And ideation and knowledge and the intelligence of thought do not transform consciousness. Therefore, they are not part of the religious quest. Though we use them as tools for communication, and also they have the value of creating the question. But thought is not a reliable instrument for the investigation into truth, because it arises from our memory. And in the memory is all our conditioning, It was mentioned in the morning talk by Michael Mendiza, who explained it very clearly, how our brain is constructed over millions of years of past. It contains all the biological instincts. It has all the cultural past of the particular culture in which we have grown up, which may be for Hinduism about 5,000 years, for Christianity about 2,000 years, and so on. And then our own personal past of the experiences in this lifetime, both the psychological aspects as well as the factual aspects, and our knowledge which we acquire through school, college, and university. All that is a very limited set. It is just my experience of this lifetime. Though the biological instincts we share in common with the whole of mankind. But if we identify with these cultural aspects, the religious aspects, the personal experience, the opinions and conclusions of my own mind, then I feel I am a separate individual from the rest of mankind, and I have a separate personality, and the ego develops as attachment to this personality, and we create a dependence on the thinking through this brain. It's a kind of addiction to one's own thoughts, forgetting that they are also the product of conditioning. So interpretation, in my view, is not avoidable, because even when I read Krishnamurti, what I read are the words he spoke, and my brain interprets the meaning. So when I read Krishnamurti also, there is interpretation going on. That's not avoidable. The question is, if I make him into an authority and simply accept that meaning, then it doesn't constitute truth. It just constitutes the knowledge of what he said. This was very pointedly brought out by him in a dialogue with students in Brockwood, where he was explaining to them that the words of the Buddha and of Jesus Christ are not truth, are illusions for you, because you have not seen the truth of that for yourself. And one of the students asked him, "Sir, aren't your words also illusions for us?" And he said, "Yes, if you accept them." So he always insisted, and you will find that in several of his talks, not out of humility, but I think because he saw the truth of that merely agreeing with something or disagreeing with it doesn't take you to the truth. They are same things. Both agreement, that's what we have been trained to do through our education. But they are both unintelligent responses to any statement which we read or hear from someone else. And why? Why is it unintelligent? Because if you say something to me and I agree, it just means that I already thought the same as what you are expressing. So it may feel good that I feel supported, that you are telling the same thing as what I think, but we may both be sharing a common illusion. That's not a proof that that is true. And if I disagree with it, and I say this is nonsense, what he is talking, because Buddha said this or Krishnamurti said this, then I don't even investigate what you are saying, what it means, and whether it is true. So again, nothing changes within me, not even my opinions. And opinions are very superficial things. They are like property. They don't transform consciousness. If they did, then all professors of Buddhist philosophy should be Buddha. all professors of Christian theology should be Christ, and you know that they are not, because their consciousness is not free from fear, from anger, from violence, from greed, from selfishness, all the problems which whole of humanity has. And the religious quest is for the ending of these negative emotions. Krishnamurti called them disorder in consciousness. He was not the first to call it disorder. Socrates also called it disorder in Greece long ago, when he said there is only one virtue, and that is order in consciousness. So, with that introduction, I want to investigate this statement of Krishnamurti and try to have a dialogue with you about what is the right place of thought, of knowledge, of the intelligence of thought, and another kind of intelligence that Krishnamurti talked about, and their role in self-knowledge, which he said is the key to wisdom. We know how we grow in knowledge. We have all grown in knowledge through our experiences, through our readings, through education, and so on. But how does a human being grow in wisdom, in his understanding of himself and of life and of his relationship? And how does he come upon the art of living, which is to put everything in its right place? Because when everything is in right place, it creates beauty. You don't have instructions how to make a beautiful picture, but a good painter is able to make a good, beautiful picture, which induces in us also the sense of beauty, because he puts things in a certain proportion which creates in the human consciousness a joy, an experience of joy or beauty. So Krishnamurti pointed out that what is our right place of pleasure? What is the right place of money? What is the right place of work? What is the right approach? What is the right spirit with which to relate, to live, to play? Who's going to point out that, and who is going to create that for us? You can't learn that from a book or you can learn a description of what other people think, but that won't bring that into your consciousness. So it's an art, and an art cannot be learned. You can learn it by yourself, not from another, from the book or something. That's how I understand him to say. So the role of thought is not so much in exploration in the religious quest. In the scientific quest it is, because there you don't need to change anything. The order in nature is already present, and we are only studying how that order works and the cause and effect relationships, which they call laws, which govern nature. And so the scientist is a student of nature, and what he calls the truth about nature is merely the laws which he perceives as operating in nature. But there again, he doesn't accept what the senses perceive as the truth. The senses perceive that the earth is flat, but that is not the truth. They perceive that the sun rises and moves around the earth, but that is not the truth. So there again, truth has to be ascertained by applying a certain scientific method which they have developed, which is based not on authority, it is based on inquiry, it is based on observation, it is based on experiment and reason. And so they have a method by which they can test whether what reality is and whether our concept about reality is correct or not. In religion, you don't have such a test. The only way you can know whether you have arrived at a deep truth by yourself or not is to watch your own consciousness. If there is still anger, greed, selfishness, conflict, sorrow, and so on in consciousness, it is informing me that I have not really perceived the truth. I have merely understood Krishnamurti or Buddha intellectually. And there is nothing wrong with that intellectual understanding, but that is not the same as the realization of the truth. That's what we mean, that the truth lies at the level of perception. And Krishnamurti said the essence of this religious quest is to discern for oneself what is true and what is false. Because then the false ends. When you have perceived for yourself what is true and what is false, then the false ends. The false being an illusion. Illusions are not facts. They don't have an actual existence in nature. They have existence only in our imagination. They are constructs of thought which we may have received either as propaganda or as values from our culture and so on, and we have accepted them as true. Then our thinking is based on a lot of illusions and a lot of falsehood. So that is why thought is not a reliable instrument, and that is how I understand Krishnamurti's statement that thinking cannot solve our major, deeper problems of life. Because in a way, all thinking is based on certain assumptions. And if you have not questioned those assumptions, and those assumptions contain many things which are false, as they often do, then they are based on the false, and therefore the thought goes wrong. It doesn't take you towards the truth. For instance, what we call love may not be love at all. We may not have investigated deeply what really love is. We may be accepting attachment, sexual desire, attraction, craving, possessiveness as love. So that's an illusion. You think you call it love, but it's not love. In the same way, we may think that religion just means going to the temple, worshipping, doing a ritual. Then we have a very superficial meaning of religion, which is not true. Really, the spirit of religion is love and compassion. And when you have not come upon that, you have merely learned some practices and you are calling that as religion. Or thought has said the cow is sacred. In Hindus, for Hindus, it is said that the cow is sacred. So they accept that the cow is sacred. And the cow becomes a sacred animal for them because they say so. They worship the cow. And then what they experience, they feel that they are experiencing the sacred. So Krishnamurti said, don't accept that definition, which is the creation of the human mind. Posit the sacred as the unknown and inquire to find out. And to inquire, to find out, you must negate what it is not. And that is inquiry. That requires inquiry. And as he said in the morning tape, if you listen to it, this seed of inquiry was planted in human consciousness by nature million years ago. And that's a very precious seed. But it needs freedom from all these illusions and conclusions and attachments to illusions for it to flower, for it to grow. And that growth is wisdom, brings wisdom. And that is self-knowledge, because you can't get it from somebody else. So he posited the learning mind as this religious mind. He said there is no, the temples and churches and mosques are not religious places because no learning is taking place there. A school can be a religious place provided learning is taking place there. Now there is two kinds of learning. There is the accumulative learning of knowledge and skills, which is the cultivation of memory. And there is this other learning, which is to discern what is true and what is false by discriminating between the two and drop away the false. This is really unlearning the false. It is not adding to memory, it is deducting from memory, subtracting from the memory that which is false and was accepted as true. That requires a different kind of intelligence than the intelligence of thought. And so he regarded this as the true intelligence, the ability to perceive what is true and what is false. After all of us go through a whole lot of experiences in our life. Whether you are a Christian or a Hindu or Muslim, not the point. Every human being, even the atheist, goes through a lot of experiences in his life. What determines whether we will pick up a truth out of that experience or we'll pick up another illusion, another prejudice? Because prejudices are also the result of experience. And truths are also the result of experience. And you can see that we don't really have the ability to pick up the truth. Because if we did have that, then all old people should be wise. You can test that. Many are very cynical, very bigoted, very sure about themselves. And one of the examples of that is a man who's standing for your presidentship.
Which one?
I would rather not. I'll leave it to you to decide that. Don't want to favor one over the other. There is not too much difference. So that is the problem with thought. Your political candidates have different assumptions from which they are doing the thinking, and they are attached to those assumptions. When you are attached to your own conclusions, your own experience, your own opinions, your mind becomes like the mind of a lawyer. It has taken sides with a particular view or with a particular person. And then it is only interested in propagating about this person or about that view. It's not examining whether it is true. So our own mind becomes like a personal lawyer defending the me and the mine. And such a mind is not interested in the truth. It is actually caught in the trap of reward and punishment. It is seeking rewards. It is both material rewards as well as psychological rewards, which are support, praise, reputation, and all that. So unless we see the truth of this and we free ourselves of it, maybe not completely, but at least you see the falseness of this or the danger of being trapped in this, that's already the beginning of a little freedom from the known. And without that little freedom from the known, there is no real inquiry. So Krishnamurti said, realize the truth that you don't know. The man who says, I know the truth, does not know. Because truth is not something to be known. Truth is something to be perceived. And you can't perceive the truth so long as your mind is filled with illusions which distort what you are perceiving. because you are perceiving a distorted truth, and a distorted truth is a lie. So a lot of work has to be done within oneself to free oneself of all these illusions in order to be able to perceive what is true. Otherwise, he said, if you don't have freedom from conditioning, your conditioning, there is no basis for your thinking. The very basis for your thinking is shady. Look at what is happening in education. We have a very narrow view of education in most educational institutes throughout the world. They are essentially set up to train boys and girls to become professionals in order to do some work in society. It's like a factory model. It is set up. The child is treated as raw material to be fashioned into an engineer or a doctor or an artist who will then perform the work in society. So the vision of education itself is too narrow. Then you can spend a lot of energy and thought and effort trying to realize that vision, and that whole thing is under a wrong vision, and it is stupid. So a lot of thinking, if your paradigm, if your assumptions are false, on which you are based, it is based, goes wrong. It will never find the truth. They recognize that in science too. They are constantly questioning the assumptions. They know that the assumptions of classical physics were those of the Newton's laws, as definite causes producing definite effects and so on, and for centuries they believed that. And if you were completely attached to those ideas, you could never have discovered either relativity or the fact that space and time are related to each other, or quantum mechanics, which is that the same cause doesn't produce the same effect, especially when it comes to elementary particles and so on. So they are constantly testing their assumptions and questioning their assumptions if they find that observations don't agree with their predictions. But in religion, we have not really promoted inquiry. We have not really said question the assumptions, and I understand Krishnamurti to be saying to that. In the religious quest also, approach it with a mind which says, I don't know the truth. Truth is the unknown. And therefore, I must find out what is false and negate the false in order to discover what is true. But when you positively accept an idea as the truth, you create what you call truth, and then experience that and think that you have come upon the truth, which is an illusion. So he didn't deny God, but he denied all our concepts about God. He said, posit God as the unknown and find out, deny all these concepts which different religions and society are giving about God. They are not God. They are creations of thought, human thought, and that's not God. But he didn't deny God. He didn't deny the sacred. He didn't deny the existence of love. But he said, what you call love is not love. So, unless we negate what is false, you don't come upon the true. That was the teaching of the Buddha also, and Michael Mendiza mentioned that in the morning in great detail. The difficulty is that the mind that has an illusion is not aware that it is in illusion. It thinks that is the truth. Right? So how is he to discover his illusion or her illusion? That's the problem. So as I understand Krishnamurti to say, don't trust your own opinions. Don't trust whatever you have been told. Doubt it. Question it. Examine it. Find out whether it is true. Be aware that it may not be true. that you may be thinking it is true, but it is not true. And from these untrue assumptions, which are illusions, the disorder arises in consciousness. So the investigation, he said, when you experience disorder in your consciousness, and that's very discernible because negative emotions are very strongly perceptible. When you are angry, when you are jealous, when you are hateful, when you find division, it's very perceptible. What is it? If you are honest and it's informing me that Krishna, you have not really freed yourself of these things, and therefore you don't know what the truth is. But the challenge then is, the inquiry then is to learn about it by watching it and to find out how it arises and from where it arises. If it arises from a nature, it's an instinct, you only can find out how to relate with it. What is its right place in your life? You can't eliminate it. But when it arises out of illusion, and most of our problems are arising from illusions, then it can be ended. That was also Buddha's statement, that ignorance is the cause of sorrow. Ignorance not as lack of knowledge, but as illusion in the mind. And therefore it can be ended, because illusion can be ended by perceiving what is true and what is false. But you don't perceive unless you inquire, and you don't inquire unless you either doubt or wonder or engage in inquiry. So, it is an inquiring mind, but it is not just an intellectual inquiry. Intellectual inquiry is done by thought, and thought and reason have their limitation, which we have just pointed out. So I like a particular metaphor for explaining the role of knowledge and thought and reason. They are like the pole of the pole vaulter. That's what the metaphor says. The pole vaulter uses that pole to raise himself up, but if he doesn't leave it, he won't get to the other side. And truth is on the other side. So, if you take that analysis which the philosopher gives you as a question, it has value. That knowledge has value because it is creating a question. But it can't answer that question. If you take the answer, you have ashes. But if you take that question and explore that question in your own life through observation, watching your own consciousness and perceiving whether what Krishnamurti said, is that really fact? Is that true? I don't accept it, but I want to verify it in my own consciousness. Then the understanding goes deeper and you see, because the truth and the falsehood here are very close to each other. You have to examine a lot in order to discern what is true and what is false. Attachment looks exactly like love. Passion looks exactly like ambition. But one is self-centered, the other is not. Love is not self-centered. Attachment and possessiveness are self-centered. So it's the inner motivation which is different. Outwardly, the actions looks very similar. And that was explained long ago in the Hindu book, the Gita, by Krishna, who was giving the sermon to Arjuna. Arjuna asked him, "Sir, what is this liberated man like? How does he sleep? How does he work? How does he eat? How does he live?" And Krishna gives a long answer, but I'll summarize it, what I understood from that. He said, outwardly, it will appear to you that he is just like the ordinary man. He sleeps like the ordinary man. He works like the ordinary man. He relates like the ordinary man. But it is not the same thing because he doesn't do it for the same reason. So it's the motivation inside which is self-centered in the case of the normal, ordinary individual, but it is not self-centered, it is out of love and compassion in the case of the sage. So it's a transformation of consciousness which makes the difference, not the transformation of ideas or beliefs. That does not change our consciousness. And the religious quest is a quest for coming upon the consciousness with which the Buddha lived, or Krishnamurti lived, or Jesus Christ lived. That's what is enlightenment. If you read Vivekananda also, his book called What Religion Is, he says there that the entire purpose of all the religions of the world is to free consciousness from all these negative emotions which are there, what the Hindus and Buddhists call liberation. You liberate yourself. Now, if there are two kinds of learning, one is the accumulative learning and the other is discerning what is true and what is false, which is unlearning the false, then there are two kinds of intelligence. The intelligence of thought and knowledge, which we find plentifully operating, and we are cultivating that. And the other intelligence, which is the intelligence of picking up, discerning what is true and what is false, and freeing yourself from this. When you do that, you see the other man is yourself. Both the Buddha and Krishnamurti pointed out that that is the truth, but we don't see the truth because we look through all our illusions and the veil of our own thoughts. Through that we perceive, and therefore we perceive him to be very different from us. And then you have the concept of brotherhood, that you must treat him as a brother and so on. But that's just a concept. It does not really become the reality or the truth because you believe in it. So if you free yourself of all the factors which create division, then only you will see that the other person is really like your brother or the same as what you are. And then it becomes reality. Otherwise it remains only an ideal, a beautiful concept which you can't live by. Krishnamurti pointed out that this quest is a quest for self-knowledge, because that's knowledge which I can acquire only by myself. I can learn by myself, not from books or from gurus. Because it's not something that you can decide to do. You know, our decision is a very small thing. It works in superficial matters. You can decide what to eat today or not to eat, or which car to buy or which house to live in, and so on. And their thought and so on helps you. But you can't decide to love. You can't decide to perceive beauty. You can't decide to be friends. You can't decide to respect someone. These things are not amenable to decision. You can't decide to be peaceful, to be happy. And yet these things can be had. Not through decision, not through will, not through desire, but as a byproduct of understanding, which is self-knowledge. And so that is the way, if he said self-knowledge is the key to wisdom. And wisdom is this mind which has freed itself of illusions. Because otherwise your mind is living in its own thought world or its own constructs. It is not living in the real world because it's not seeing things as they are. It is going on with its own imagination and living with that imagination. And of course my imagination would be different from the Muslims' imagination, is different from the Christians and so on, because it is affected by all the assumptions with which they have grown. And they call those assumptions as our culture, and they own it. So it was beautifully explained this morning by Michael Mendiza that what we call culture, what we call our values maybe are the same, identified as the self, which is the ego. So it's a complex process. Human consciousness is a very complex thing. And when you want to study a complex thing, really understand a complex thing, you must watch it. Not interfere with it. Watch it like a phenomenon that actually exists in nature. It is actually there, taking place. And in watching and with a learning mind, you can discover, you can learn about it. And whatever you discover to be false will drop away, and to that extent you are wiser. So as I think, this is not what Krishnamurti said, but this is what I think. Totally free men or enlightened men have been very few. Maybe the Buddha, maybe Jesus, maybe Lao Tzu, maybe Socrates. A few.
Are there any women?
Maybe Mirabai, I don't know. Yeah, there have been sages, but somehow a cultural impact has been that women were forced to only be in the home and look after children and cook food and so on. They were not educated into all this. The religious affairs were all done by men, taken up by men in most cultures. And therefore perhaps fewer women sages. But there have been women sages. But what I was trying to point out was that we don't know what total enlightenment is and what is liberation, and seems to be a very rare phenomenon. But wise human beings are not so few. And therefore the actual question for us is, how does one grow in wisdom? And of course the pinnacle of wisdom is liberation. Right? So I personally think that you may not have the total insight which brings you to liberation, or you may, because insight is a very mysterious process. All major scientific discoveries also require insight. All new, completely new forms of art, of music, literature also require insights. And insights are not thought processes. They are a mysterious process that only human consciousness seems to be capable of. Not the animal, not the computer. The computer, huh? How can I prove that? I see that. And when you see something, you don't need to prove it. But you need to doubt it. I could be mistaken in what I am saying. And that I said right from the beginning, that I am not claiming to be the authority on truth or on even Krishnamurti. Yeah. I'll just throw it, I'm about to finish, so I'll throw it open for dialogue. I've lost the thread.
Insight.
Yes, I was talking about insight, that in science too, a completely new discovery is not the product of thinking. The thought creates the question. I'll take an example because I'm a physicist. Say, Einstein was educated in classical physics, where they always had the assumption that time has nothing to do, it cannot be converted into space and vice versa, that they are completely separate entities. It's not in our experience either. We don't have any phenomenon where we see time and space interchanged with each other. So it was not in his experience, it was not in his training. How did he discover this great truth that space and time are connected to each other and we live in a space-time continuum, a four-dimensional world? Now that is an insight. That is, the human consciousness, when it is wondering, when it's staying with a question, has this mysterious capacity to make a foray into the unknown, pick up something from there and bring it down into the known. And then it uses thought, it uses knowledge, language and so on to explain that to others. Logic as well, reason also. Take the example of Jesus Christ. He was born in the Jewish culture, brought up with an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and so on. How did he come upon the fact that you must show your other cheek also, which is not reply violence with violence? How did he come upon that? He didn't have Christianity to teach him that. He discovered that for himself. So all such great discoveries, whether in religion or in science, have come out of deep insights, but those insights occur in minds which are questioning, which are wondering, which are observing, which are doubting whether what we know is true or not. And that kind of learning mind, relying on observation, is the religious mind. That's what Krishna said. And he said, the religious mind has no dogma. It has no belief. It moves from fact to fact. Therefore, the religious mind is the scientific mind. But the scientific mind is not the religious mind. And a mind trained in the knowledge of science is not a religious mind. So when it comes to finding out the truth about how nature functions, the scientific approach and the scientific method are of value. But in the religious quest, the approach is of value, but the method cannot be used because the observed is not separate from the observer. And there is this disorder to be ended. And in nature, there is no such disorder to be ended. Nature is always in order, has always been in order. That order may sometimes help you and sometimes be against human interests, but that's incidental. There is no intention in nature to hurt you when a storm blows or an earthquake comes. So the ego is not there in nature anywhere except in human consciousness. So that's why the question whether the ego is just our own creation of our own imagination, in which case it's an illusion. And the sages have pointed out that it is an illusion. But our mind takes that for fact and acts on it and works on it. So if you perceive this for yourself and you see the danger of approaching life egoistically, then it may drop away. Because when you perceive danger, that perception changes things. But when you don't perceive, you only intellectually agree with it, it is not the perception of danger and it doesn't transform consciousness. Sir, you don't have to accept what I am saying. I am not trying to convince you of it. I have just explained, I have investigated into case teachings and so on for myself, and this is how I understand his teachings. I may be mistaken, which is fine. So you mustn't accept what I am saying. You must also investigate for yourselves. Thank you. Yeah, we can have questions if there is time. What time do we have to end? Till 5 p.m. It's 4:30, so we have time. Yes, please.
Your present state of consciousness, how you would define that, and if it's helpful for you, you might, define it, speak as well to where your consciousness has been. So just by virtue of comparing. So the question is just to speak to your own state of consciousness. I'd like, just to hear this from your own experiencing.
Maybe if we meet outside, I can talk about it because it's rather personal. But I think it's not important to know about the other person's state of consciousness. It's not important to know whether Krishnamurti was a totally free man or not. It is important to investigate what he has pointed out. Because even if he is a totally free man, I can't get the truth from him. He can't give me that consciousness. So it's not important. And okay, Here in this room, perhaps many people believe that he was a free man. But across the road, you go and meet Radha Schloss, she doesn't believe so. How will you prove that your belief is better than hers or more correct than hers? So it's a useless question. Why do we want to investigate what another human being's consciousness is? It's more important to learn about oneself. And he has pointed out how this learning can be done. Every time you experience a negative emotion, it's an opportunity for learning. Normally we have been taught that anger and hatred and jealousy and so on are negative emotions, so they should be suppressed or you should escape from them and so on. He's saying no, they're jewels. Watch it. It's an opportunity to learn. And when you learn, that learning brings about change, not your desire to change.
Yes.
So if you understand that deeply, you don't try to change. You know that my objective is to understand life and myself, unconsciousness. Whatever change is to happen, will happen. What you deserve, you will get. What you don't deserve, why should you get?
Yes, and I only ask because I agree with everything you said, and I only ask because in my own experience, I can really only speak from what I know in my own, it's like I am all I can know, ultimately, this self-understanding. So I ask it from that, so it's to move it from the intellectual, to the very personal, and I would love to speak to you later.
Yeah, but it is, like I said, the two run very close and parallel to each other, and it is very difficult to discern what has come to you through your own insight and what is coming from your knowledge or not. So I don't think I can honestly answer that because I really myself don't know. I can only inquire about it. I also doubt it, how much is coming. But one thing is there. Like in physics, you have a galvanometer to detect whether a current is flowing or not. The galvanometer is your consciousness. If you are still feeling jealousy, anger, hatred, conflict, you know that you have not come upon deep understanding of life.
One of your themes seemed to be, was that rational thought can't take us far enough, and I think that your primary reason was because all thought has what we might call first principles, and that we can't get beyond those first principles. I'd like to just see what your reaction is to a different approach, and that is to say that rational intellectual thought can move us a bit further if we're willing to jump into a different paradigm, another term you used. From my current paradigm, look at the assumptions, the premises of the other paradigm, and then play them off against each other. In other words, I'm exploring the fact that different rational systems have different starting places, and I'm wondering if you would agree that that process of exploring different sets of first principles might indeed lead us closer to an awakened state.
If it is really an exploration, yes, because it is the exploring mind which has this possibility of coming upon insight. But if it is only comparing, judging, does this suit me better or that one suits me better, and choosing between one or the other, it does not transform consciousness.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think that's important because it's too easy for people to dismiss rational intellectual thought as being worthless in terms of moksha or finding liberation or whatever we want to call it. It seems to me that there is a role for that, and that the for me at least, the best way to think of it is it's a limited role, and to focus on a limitation, but not to throw it out completely.
Yes, that's what it means to put it in its right place. If you don't use thought where thought is required and normal and healthy, it goes wrong. if you try to use thought to get to something where thought has no role, again it goes wrong. So how will you find out where thought, in which region thought should be used and where thought cannot reach? Without inquiry, without discerning for yourself, no guru can teach you that. It's not like engineering where you draw a line clearly and say, don't build beyond this, it is here, like that. It's not like that. So where does wish end and desire begin? Right? Where does love end and attachment and possessiveness begin? Where does the self end and the other begin? So I have to find out what is the right place of everything in life. No? How much should I pursue sex and have more and more of it, or should I abdicate from sex and have celibacy and all that? The two extremes. The middle path is you have to discern what is your right relationship. Then there will be no conflict if you are putting it in the right place. But in both extremes there is conflict. And this middle path is not something that can be described by anybody to you. Including how much should I eat? I have to be sensitive enough to watch and find out for myself that, okay, to eat this much is all right, but if I overeat, then it gives me problems, right? Things like that. So that's what it means, that it's an art. Art or a balance cannot be learned from a book. Even bicycling cannot be learned from a book, no? You have to get up on the bicycle and fall a few times, then you will know. So don't mind the falling. It's part of learning. Don't mind the failure. Don't mind the negative emotion coming. Treat it as an opportunity to learn.
Ask your questions.
So Krishnamurti said the approach to a question is more important than either the question or the answer. If you are approaching it egoistically, it goes wrong. If you are approaching it with wonder and non-egoistically, it has a tremendous potential in it. The inquiry itself must be free from the self.
Hello.
Yes,
Hi.
sir.
At the outset, you spoke of, or you mentioned that there's no intelligence without compassion. And a few things are running around in my head. One is that the compassion, comes from the heart. It's not a rational question. And the other, which I would love to pass to you, is the feminine aspect, or perhaps also the psychic aspect, where things are experienced directly. There is a degree of sublimation of the ego, especially the masculine and feminine. We all know that women are juggling a million things all the time in a 360-degree experience, whereas men do tend to this rationalistic, linear
Yes, sir,
approach.
I've got your question. So I will give you an extreme example to illustrate the difference. In his own profession, Hitler was a very intelligent man. As a military person and in taking decisions and dictatorships and so on, that's how he rose to the top of his country. But what he lacked was love and compassion for other human beings other than Nazis, right? He drew that. So would you call him intelligent? If he had compassion and so on, this cleverness of thought and so on may have been useful. But the whole thing goes wrong when the vision itself is wrong, right? And not to have the right vision is lack of intelligence, the other kind of intelligence which we are talking of, which comes through self-knowledge and understanding and humility and so on.
Okay. It's just, I haven't heard a lot about compassion. I mean, I agree with you, but what
Alright,
about
I
compassion?
take
What
another,
about-
I can recreate the question in different ways. Do you think our world's problems are because we are not intelligent enough in the kind of intelligence that we value in society? Or all the problems of the world are the creation of these highly educated, so-called intelligent human beings who are becoming army men, scientists who make nuclear bombs and Kalashnikov rifles, and PhDs and so on, like me, who become diplomats, who become presidents, and so on. So, or is the ignorant villager in India or Argentina or elsewhere creating the problems of the world? You answer it. So, is that intelligent? No. Is that intelligence?
I don't think so.
Yeah. That's what Krishnamurti is pointing out, that it's not. And I want to share with you an interesting poem, which jocularly raised this question, but I think we should take it seriously. It's about a man visiting a zoo and holding a dialogue or a conversation with an ape. I read it long ago, it came in the newspaper.
You are the ape.
No, wait.
Oh, no.
It'll come.
I thought what,
I'm 78 now, so it takes a little while, but it'll come.
it'll come. It's a great story.
At the zoo one day, I met a most superior ape, of frank and noble countenance and of a pleasing shape. Superior ape, I said, pray tell, a thing I long to know. If the summer hydrogen bomb brought the floods, will the winters bring the snow? Surely, sir, the ape replied, after some hesitation. If you do not think I presume above my proper station, there is no need to worry. With such great risks, no man will drop another in a hurry. Ah, foolish ape, you missed the point, cried I in indignation. Drop them we must. We thus ensure democracy's salvation. Well, sir, the ape replied, if you are intent on dying, I see small difference in freezing or in frying. But if all that evolution has done is bring you to this stage, I should be outside, he said, and you be in this cage. So we think we are very intelligent. We think we are very intelligent. We are superior to animals and so on. But have we used our gifts of imagination, memory, and thought and language to constructively? Have we used it for justice? Have we used it for peace? Have we used it for protection of the weak? So, what is our definition of
We
superiority?
stopped doing so since the moment
Pardon?
we stopped doing so since the moment we stepped away from nature how it was, because all the rest of the animal kingdom is content with their lives as they are. And they have no need for rationality.
Yes, but that moving away from nature we call intelligence, no?
I don't know.
No,
Does
so
it
it's
seem
not
like-
intelligence is what Krishnamurti is pointing out. He's pointing out, yeah.
Well, I have a question.
Hi.
I have a question. Can I go or should I give it to her?
No, go ahead, please, you will be.
It depends on whether you are approaching.
Well, there was a statement, and I've heard it a number of times, about something alluding to, and I can't rephrase it exactly, but that we are somehow of superior intelligence or compassion than animals, and that we all kind of have this knowledge, or we assume that that is so, and yet having observed human violence towards each other to the incredible extent that it's happened on this planet, and animal violence, I question that. And I've seen animals do beautiful, compassionate things with each other. And I just have some concern about what I see as an assumption, and yet some people say it's my observation that we are superior in our compassion, in our evolved consciousness over animals.
I didn't say that. I questioned it.
Okay,
I questioned it whether
I
human
don't remember
beings
the
are
exact
really
words.
superior. No. Yeah. I questioned it whether human beings are really superior to animals, and how will you prove it? Because we have defined superiority as ability, as this intelligence of cleverness, of knowledge, and so on. In that we are superior to the animals. But if we do not understand what is the right use of these gifts which evolution has given us, we are going to self-destruct ourselves. No. That's what Krishnamurti mentioned in the tape this morning, and it's a serious matter. And we are close to it. The scientists are saying that now. Read the book by Martin Rees. He was the president of the Royal Society of London, one of the top astronomers of the world, cosmologist. A book called Our Final Century. Mind you, he's a scientist, not a religious man. He's giving scientific evidence of how we are moving towards extermination, exterminating ourselves. Through global warming, through nuclear things, through terrorism and so on. So this mix of ignorance and power is the dangerous mix. We have come upon power through all that kind of intelligence, but we haven't come upon wisdom. And power without wisdom is dangerous.
In the statement when you talked about the world of nature is operating in order. Where man is concerned, man is in a state of disorder. So our fellow earth creatures, let's say, who are part of this great order, it's possible they could be living out of insight built into that order. I don't know. But when I look at conversation, my own inquiry, we see the brutalities going on in the world, yet we remain Americans, Canadians, all the different identities. And what I can see, I can only see as far as I can see. And I see in my daily life the constant work, what Kay talks about from my side that I see is I'll never think myself out of myself. There's no system, there's no method. I have a tremendous difficulty giving all that up, and the subtleties of that incoherency wreak havoc in my life when I don't remain with the truth of that. Which means in subtle things, I could name 1,000 things where you eat meat, where you actually think that you eat healthy, that you have to do body work, you have to do yoga, you have to do this. These are just all methods that ego is attached to because you don't want to address your own behavior.
So just a minute, I got your question. I would like to respond to it. Krishnamurti is not saying that all methods should be done away with, all organizations should be done away with. He organized the foundation, he organized schools. So he's not against those organizations. He's against spiritual organization trying to take man to truth. And he is not against all paths. He himself used to practice yoga for 2 or 3 hours every day, and pranayama and so on. I have seen him doing it. Right? He never said that was necessary to come upon freedom, which doesn't mean you must not use any methods. Of course, yoga benefits your body and maybe brings you peace of mind. It will not remove your illusions. So it will not remove your ego.
So it's the attitude about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you are doing that practice as part of your learning, to ascertain what that does, that's part of learning mind, of the learning mind. But if you are doing it egoistically and saying, I can hold my breath much longer than anybody in this town, you have built your ego on your technique, right? Yeah. So the ego won't go away. There is no technique for getting away of the ego because that's just the approach. So you have to learn about your own approach, and that cannot be taught to you by somebody else, nor is it a mechanical thing which can erase it. There is no mechanical thing. That's how I understand him to mean that truth is a pathless land. And elsewhere he gave a very beautiful metaphor for this. He said, truth enters the mind like a burglar. You know, the burglar enters your house. You don't know when he will come. You don't know which way he will come. But he has to break down the defenses of your house in order to enter. So lower your defenses, keep your mind open,
Yes.
and maybe it comes, maybe it doesn't. There is no guarantee. And then to ask for a guarantee is ego.
You could open the window, but the breeze has to come in by its own
That's
accord.
right, that's right. That's another beautiful metaphor.
Was that Rumi?
No, that was
No,
Krishnamurti.
Krishnamurti. But there is not too much difference. You had a question, I think.
Yes,
one.
so my question is about this process of negation.
Yeah.
It does involve a level of disruption, denying, and degradation. How did Krishnamurti want us to go ahead with this process of negation?
If you say to yourself, I want to find out what really love is, the love which the Buddha and Jesus Christ have talked about, then it is not jealousy. So I must find out and end jealousy in my consciousness. Then it's not attachment. So I must free my consciousness of attachment. When you are freed, everything that is not love, right, which blocks love, of it, you would be there. You would come to it. That's what is the method of negation. That it's not this, it is not this, it is not this, which is denying the false. And so false drops away. But that is all self-knowledge. And each one of these steps needs an insight, which is the question I asked Michael Mendoza in the morning. You see, I don't think insight is ever completely blocked. There are examples of it in history. For example, the Emperor Ashoka was known to be an extremely cruel king. And he reigned over many, fought many wars and so on, and he was a very cruel man. But after the war of Kalinga, seeing the disaster that had happened and the deaths he had created and so on, something dawned on him that it's awful. So he had an insight. He became a Buddhist. He went and accepted Buddhism. And thereafter, for 15-20 years, he ruled as one of the most benevolent kings. Now, I'm not saying he got enlightened. He didn't become Buddha. But that transformation is a major transformation. So even within the field in which we live, any major transformation comes through insight. Yeah, like that. And it is not blocked for us. Krishnamurti also says that you can get glimpses of it before that. But when you really free yourself, the enlightened man continuously lives with insight and not through memory and through ideas and knowledge. So, he is again inquiring. That's the reason why if you read his book, you never feel boring. You never find it boring saying, well, he answered this question there before, I have read it already. Because every time he is inquiring into it afresh, he is not coming from previous knowledge like the professors do. You see? Yeah. So that's the
Which
difference.
book do you recommend for this?
Begin with Freedom from the Known. Just a 100-page book.
Just on the same question of insight.
Yeah.
I think maybe I'm wrong in understanding, but
Doesn't matter, sir. We are in good company when we are wrong.
But I think what Krishnamurti said, what I think you said, is that insight is not a product of analysis. Is that true?
No, the analysis creates a question. And it has the value that it can bring you to a deeper and deeper question which you never had before in your mind. But ultimately it cannot answer what the truth is. It can't answer because it's not an idea. It's not just concept. It can give you a concept of the truth as given by Buddha or so and so, but that's not perception. So the
But
guru cannot give you perception.
The process of asking deeper and deeper questions, that's ultimately analysis, right? There's what
Well,
is the
so
separate
we are finding out what value analysis has and what are its limitations. Both the things. Self-knowledge is not to say analysis is bad or analysis is good. That is just an opinion. Self-knowledge is to put analysis in its right place. In a way, what Krishnamurti is doing is analysis, but he is using it for communication. And he is saying, don't accept it. He is saying, investigate it. I have found it through perception, but I am explaining it to you. I am using analysis to explain to you. Reason has that value. Thought has that value, that it can explain to you the meaning that I want to communicate to you. But if you accept the meaning and agree with it, you don't come upon perception. I may have.
So that gets to what is that real difference between perception and analysis? I don't see it. I feel that
one is an
process of
idea,
analysis-
the other is seeing. If you want a very coarse example, do you need analysis and explanation to understand that the fire will burn your finger? No. I can give you a
it's a result
scientific
of previous
explanation
analysis.
that this is carbohydrate, and when you put it at 1500 degrees centigrade, it will combine with oxygen, and that's an exothermic reaction, and so it's burning, and it will increase the burning. Then that will send information to the brain through the sensory nerves, and the brain will order the motor nerves to ask the muscles to withdraw the finger.
So
All that
I would
is
say
true.
that
Wait
it's
a
a-
minute. All that is true, but you don't need that. You have a direct perception of the danger of putting your finger in the fire, right? Now, can you have a direct perception like that about approaching life with the ego?
So then what's the difference between perception and conditioning? Because what you described is kind of conditioning. It's a reflex that is saying that I shouldn't put my hand in the fire because my prior experience has
The
been...
difference is your mother telling you you should not smoke because it will damage your health, and the other is that you get a pang of pain and you realize that that is true for yourself. Two are different. All the arguments are only telling you something as an idea. One perception is more valuable than all the arguments.
Professor Krishna, you said Krishnamurti did practice yoga 2 to 3 hours a day.
Yeah.
I understand yoga is defined as union with God.
Yeah.
What type of yoga was he practicing, or types?
I didn't ask him, but I think he said that he does it just to keep his body supple and healthy and so on. So that there is, just a minute, so that, he defined religion as collecting all the energy that you have for doing this inquiry. So that includes the energy, not losing energy through bad sleep or bad food or bad health and so on. Yeah. So you have to do that also. That's part of a religious life, no? But in that he was not forcing himself to do that. I saw that he does it with great joy and so on. And I do yoga, I need to force myself out of bed and do it as a decision. Yeah, so that tells me that, Krishna, you haven't come to that state yet, right? Yeah, sure. You have to be honest in this. Without honesty, there is no learning mind. You have to be honest. You have to know yourself exactly as you are. And neither accept it, nor feel proud of it, nor ashamed of it. That's what you are. But what you are, not fixed. It can change. That awareness is. As you grow in wisdom, change happens. As you grow in your understanding of life and of yourself, change happens. We are all changed, maybe not too much, but a little bit change has been there. I don't know if you ask me when did I last feel jealous or compare myself with my neighbor or feel envy and so on. I can't even now, I don't even remember when I last felt that. But sometime in childhood and so on, I must have felt that it has gone somewhere. I don't even know when it went away. So that is evidence to me that illusions can end. This illusion that comparison is essential is what the university and college and so on teaches you. So that's a kind of propaganda in which the mind is caught. You can see the falseness of it, that it's just a disease. And when you stop comparing yourself with others, you have ended hierarchy, you have ended envy, jealousy, a lot of things, conflict, you have ended by that. So you go on your bicycle every day, you are quite happy, and then your neighbor gets a car, and then you are unhappy. Why? So you question that. Why? Why? Nothing has changed in my life. So what makes me unhappy if he gets a car? It's as simple as that. But you have to learn all this by yourself and free yourself of that. In other words, we are the authors of our own sorrow, and we don't know that. We think sorrow, life brings sorrow, other people create my sorrow, and so on. But we have a very big part in it, the way we are approaching life. And we need to learn to approach life differently. Yes, sir. Yeah? Yeah.
Why you want to differentiate emotions as negative or whatever it is? Emotion.
Yes, sir. Well, compassion is also an emotion. Would you say it's a negative emotion? When you see another man suffering, you feel that suffering and you feel compassion. Would you call that a negative emotion? Or you care for someone just out of love, not wanting anything for yourself, would you call that a negative emotion? Negative emotion will produce frustration, would produce conflict and so on. So it's easy to discern. You feel that when you are greedy, when you are selfish, when you are violent, when you are angry, when you are frustrated, you feel that. It's painful. The other one is not painful. When you see a beautiful sunset and it's a joy, it's not painful. That's not a negative emotion. That's something nature has put into us which we don't have to get rid of. It's beautiful. But all these painful things are our own creation, and we don't realize that it's our own creation. To a large extent, the physical pain is not our creation. If Krishnamurti falls down and breaks his bones, he will feel pain the way you and I feel. But the self-pity, so you have to discern between the psychological part of the suffering and the physical suffering. The psychological part you can get rid of. That is your own creation of your own thinking. But I think, sir, we must stay with these questions, and it's 5 o'clock now. Thank you. Come and visit us in Rajghat in Benares. I extend